Hey friends, this is Vasily. How do I get into philosophy?
There's nothing like wholesome food to help keep you in good health. What do you think?
So philosophy is one of those things that a lot of people have a hard time getting into, mostly because it seems very intimidating. It's like all this meta thought and all these ideas, and while I do think philosophy is those things, I also think that philosophy has a lot to offer our modern society. There's definitely a lot of benefits within philosophy that we can apply if we just start asking ourselves deeper questions. So why would any of us get into philosophy in the first place? Maybe philosophy for you is something that old Greek people thought about in a bathtub hundreds of years ago, or something depressed French people wrote about. But in reality, philosophy is so much more, and it can really be closely related to the things we feel and the things we do every day. I know that today when I ate my second helping of almond butter and bananas on toast, I asked myself, why did I do that? Why do I do anything? And these are exactly the kind of questions philosophy can answer for you. Maybe. So why get into philosophy? Let's make a list. Some people get into philosophy because they want to better understand the world around them. Some people get into philosophy because they really want to know why we do things the way we do and why society's gotten to a certain point. Some people, like myself, just like the word philosophy. Some people just think the idea of philosophy sounds super cool and stoic. Getting into philosophy might also help understand yourself and why you feel the way you feel and do the things you do and why the way you why. I also like asking why a lot, and I think philosophy helps you ask the best whys. Why do I like almond butter more than peanut butter? Why are bananas so good? Why do so many people use TikTok? How come my glasses always have smudges on them? Will I ever finish reading all the books I want to read? Why do people want to read books? Why do some sounds make you want to dance and other sounds make you want to cry? Why do some languages have words for complex emotions, but other languages don't have those same words for complex emotions yet are more commonly used? Why can't my cat decide if he wants to be inside the room or outside the room? So those might be some reasons people want to get into philosophy. If you have different reasons, please let me know down below in the comments. Okay, so you've decided you want to get into philosophy. Now you're thinking, Vasily, how do I get into philosophy? What do I do? Where do I start? Philosophy can be kind of intimidating, I quite understand, mostly because I've spent a lot of time reading philosophy. But by no means am I an expert in philosophy. I'm not trying to take an authoritative stance in this, I'm just trying to give you some tips that would have helped me when I was first starting out. Let me tell you a funny story. After high school, I didn't really read any novels. In fact, I pretty much only exclusively read philosophy books, and I used to think I was dumb. And I felt this way because it took me months to finish a single book that was only about 150 pages to 200 pages. Meanwhile, I'm hearing about all these people finishing other books and all these novels so quickly, a couple of days, maybe a day, and I'm thinking to myself, how come I can't read as fast as these people? By the way, I try to make videos that help me and other people get into new things, so if that's something you're into, consider subscribing. Back to the topic. So what do you need to get into philosophy? Well, I have a list for that too. First thing on the list is patience. Getting into philosophy can be extremely intimidating and pretty scary, and honestly, the thing you have to understand most about philosophy is that you're not going to understand most of it right away. In fact, you might not understand most of it at all, ever. The reality is that some concepts just might not click, and you might not feel a direct attachment to it, or even, maybe you don't even want to understand that concept, and that's okay. The point is to get as much information as you can, and even if you don't agree with it, consider it. The second thing you really need to get into philosophy is a notebook. Philosophy isn't one of those things you could just read passively and casually go through the pages and think, oh, that's a cool idea, I understand this whole concept. Philosophy is very dense, and oftentimes entire lectures in universities are built around a single paragraph in one book, which is honestly pretty wild, and which is why philosophy, if you're going to get into it, you have to be willing to study it. You got to be willing to take notes and to really read and reread the passages you just read. Everyone likes to take notes differently. Some people put post-its in the book, some people write directly in the margins, some people like to write paragraphs in notebooks at the same time as they're reading. What's important is that you actually take active notes as you're doing the reading and not wait until way later when the thought might have left your head. It's not going to be easy, but it doesn't necessarily have to be hard either. If you approach philosophy with the desire to understand why, then you're already halfway there. Another thing you need to get into philosophy is some kind of time. I find it easiest to dedicate a certain amount of time a day or every other day, or having a specific schedule of when you want to do your research in philosophy. Because again, this is going to be research. It's going to be something that after you put the book down, you're really going to want to consider and think about and apply to your day-to-day life. Because the concepts in philosophy texts are generally about day-to-day life. and can be applied to anybody. Something that's really great to have when you're studying philosophy is somebody to talk to. I tried to incorporate philosophy in my day-to-day conversations and really assess the things that are going on around me in a philosophical way, trying to apply the theories that I just read. But I think I would have definitely benefited from having somebody to talk to on a regular basis about what I just read. So if you have a friend that's interested in philosophy and is willing to read the same thing you're reading at the same time, that would be a really big help. Another thing that you need that's really important to study philosophy is a starting point. One of my biggest challenges when trying to get into philosophy was I had no idea where to start. You're probably familiar with some isms of philosophy, like Stoicism, Existentialism, Cynicism, those kind of things. But even so, where do you start? Who do you read? How do you know what to read? And how come it's all so complicated? When studying philosophy, there's two things to consider. There are primary texts and secondary texts. Primary texts are the source material that probably are translated into your language. So these are books like Plato's Republic, Spinoza's Ethics, or The Art of Rhetoric by Aristotle. These books are considered primary texts. And honestly, they have different difficulty levels because different philosophers write in very different ways. The same way you and I would communicate differently, Aristotle and Spinoza communicated differently. So knowing where to start there is super key. Examples of secondary texts would be Cynics, or Basic Teachings of the Great Philosophers. There's also a lot of material out there that is almost like regurgitated philosophy. These are like really short summaries of basic ideas that philosophers had, and in reality, these are really condensed versions of the ideas of the philosophers themselves. Reading a secondary text wouldn't be exactly a bad thing, but it's your interpretation of the secondary text that's most important. I, for example, found it very beneficial to use this secondary text to gauge what philosophers I wanted to read about. This book gives you a quick taste on the thoughts of some philosophers, and it really opened the door for me to figure out who I wanted to get to know and who I wanted to read. It brought people into light for me like Albert Camus or Jean-Paul Sartre. The important thing is that's not where you want to stop. You don't want to stop at a secondary text and think, okay, I read this, I have a good gist of everyone's philosophy, I don't need to read anything more. This should just really be a tool to figure out who you want to read more about. I personally like to try to figure out how this author got to that conclusion after I read the same text and try connecting the dots. All that being said, it's still pretty hard to figure out where exactly to jump in. I 100% would not recommend starting with Nietzsche or Spinoza. I have found these two books to be extremely difficult, and to be honest, I'm not close to done either of them. However, I would say a nice easy jumping ground for most people to get started in is Plato's Republic. This book contains a wide variety of Plato's concepts and ideas, which he makes super approachable by delivering them as a conversation between Socrates and the public, thus making it a great starting point because literally everything is presented as an argument. Socrates has all these great ideas and the public demands proof of concept. So even if you disagree with the concept in this book, you could align yourself with the public and have Socrates try to argue for his points. Now, that being said, one of the things that is super important in philosophy is that you remain flexible and you don't have to agree with everything you read. These are just some people's ideas that they've thought about for a really long time, and a lot of philosophy counters other philosophy. And don't forget the original goal of studying philosophy in the first place. Finding new points of view, learning new ways of thinking, trying to better understand yourself, and being more curious. My personal goal with philosophy isn't to find the best way of thinking. It's more so about understanding how I think and why I think certain things. A lot of times I find that the way I feel or a certain ideology I might have at a certain time really aligns with a specific philosopher, and I kind of just dive into those works and try to figure out how I align best with them, and if I do at all. Sometimes I figure out that I guess I don't really align with this train of thought, or maybe I'm more stoic than I thought I was. Either way, I think the study of philosophy is not so much about finding answers to questions, more so about having better questions. So there you have it. That's all the things I think you need to get started with philosophy. I would recommend checking out a secondhand bookstore near you to find some of these books. A lot of the times people buy philosophy books because they're constantly being reprinted, and they often end up in secondhand books or used bookstores. It's probably a really great way to get your hands on a whole bunch of different books. You have a nice spread when you get started. Is there anything you feel like I missed, or is there something still holding you back from jumping into philosophy? If so, let me know down below and we can talk about it. If you like this video, consider subscribing. I make videos about trying new things that are fun, interesting, or just generally helpful. Like some of them right here. See ya.